Ici Londres.
What are we to make of this belligerent new tone from Brussels? The sneaky and discourteous leaking by Jean-Claude Juncker's office of what was supposed to have been a private dinner in Downing Street. And now the sudden upping of the demand for Britain's divorce bill to €100 billion, 100 billion. Suspiciously round figure there, by the way, almost as though someone was just plucking a number from the air for dramatic effect. How do we reconcile that new tone with the relatively constructive and practical tone of the EU's official response to the Article 50 letter? Well, here's one thing I've learnt in politics. You should always pay more attention to what people say on the record rather than to what they brief off the record. It's the on-the-record stuff that they've really had to think about. It's human nature to overvalue what you're told in private, but in general, you're better off sticking to what's official. And when we look at the substance of what the EU is officially saying, we see that the two positions are still fairly close. But plainly that is causing a certain amount of disquiet to some ultra-federalists here in Brussels. There are two different tendencies in the EU in these talks. There are the bulk of the 27 member states, and in fairness also some people in the European Commission and Parliament, who take an essentially practical line. They want to optimise the advantages to the EU and to their own member states from Brexit, and they recognise that that's best done through a cordial process which brings advantages to both sides. But then there are those who see the whole thing in theological rather than in practical terms, who take the view that when Britain voted to leave, we blasphemed against the doctrine of ever closer union. All manner of sins and blasphemy shall be forgiven unto man, but the blasphemy against the Holy Ghost shall not be forgiven unto man. If you've taken the abominable step of voting no to their pet project, then only excommunication and hellfire will do. And I think to some extent we're seeing a tussle between those two tendencies, and some selected leaking by the European Commission trying to elbow its way back into the talks process. As it happens, the European treaties are very clear that we're talking to the other 27 ultimately, rather than to the European Commission. But I've seen many times in the years that I've been here the way in which the Commission will elbow its way into a process where the treaties reserve power to the member states, largely because it has little else to occupy it. There's an imbalance of time and resources. What's been really fascinating, though, has been the response of the opposition parties in the United Kingdom. Unhesitatingly, they've lined up with Juncker against the Prime Minister. They've taken at face value everything that was leaked. They're even siding with the EU on the financials. Now, this is a very, very strange thing, because if we take the Juncker leak absolutely as written, then it's very clear that it's he who is pushing for the toughest of hard Brexits, and it's Theresa May who is trying to be a grown-up and to find practical ways of cooperating after we've left. And so Keir Starmer and Tim Farron and Nick Clegg, all the people who have spent the last 9 months railing against a hard Brexit, are now so blinded by their partisanship and their dislike of a Conservative government that they're actually siding with Juncker, even though he is proposing the hardest of hard Brexits. Well, if the Prime Minister was looking for a vindication of her basic argument, which is that these people are not to be trusted with our best interests in the talks, they themselves have provided it out of their own mouths. Faced with a choice between a British Prime Minister doing her best to advance our national interest and a Eurocrat who, in his own words, says that he wants us to be worse off after Brexit, they have chosen to side with the Eurocrat. That tells you everything you need to know.